Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Rosie and today I want to talk to you about BetterHelp. This is not a sponsored video, I have no affiliation with them at all. But this is going to be my very honest review of BetterHelp. I'm sat next to my brother's fish tank, so if you can hear like a constant whirring or like water sounds, it's that, and I'm sorry, this is just the best place to film at the moment. But yeah, I want to talk to you about BetterHelp because I'd seen it advertised on a few different kind of platforms or different people talking about it, I guess, and Ali Abdal was one of them, and I actually got a 10% discount code using his name. I'll leave it on screen if you want to go ahead and use that as well to get yourself a discount. It saved me 10% for my first month, and I kind of want to talk to you about my experience with BetterHelp because I think it probably wasn't what you're expecting or what you're kind of wanting me to say, I don't know. So I got the 10% discount. When you fill out the form to kind of sign up for BetterHelp, I also put in that I earn less money, which is absolutely true. So I paid £40 per week for 4 weeks, and I think otherwise it's about £60 or £65 a week, something like that. So I think it kind of depends on if you say you earn a lot of money or not. So I think it's kind of automatic, you don't have to prove your pay slips or anything. So it's about £40 per week, which includes one 50-minute consultation, well not consultation, meeting, therapy session, whatever you want to call it, per week, and also unlimited texts via the application. So that's the kind of general idea, and what you do is when you sign up you fill out a form saying what you're looking for, kind of the things that you want to talk about and that you want to specialise in, but also in terms of what you want your therapist to be. So I want a female and I wanted someone who was not religious, just because I've had an abortion. I didn't want somebody thinking I'm going to hell when I'm talking about that. So that was why I got those two kind of options. And I think also talking to a woman I find easier mostly than talking to men about things like periods and miscarriages and that kind of thing. And you can also specialise what you want them to know about, so them to kind of specialise in. I'm going to leave on screen one side or the other the things that I ticked so you can see what I kind of asked for, if that makes sense. And the reason I started BetterHelp was because I'm currently going through IVF. Well, not currently, I'm sort of in the process of starting IVF, embryo freezing. And I thought I probably could do with having somebody I could talk to about the whole process. So in terms of the good things, the bad things, any triggers, anything that upsets me, anything that kind of, just anything that comes up in general, rather than just speaking to my husband or friends and family. I thought it probably could be a good idea to talk to a professional, to be able to get professional help and actually talk through things in like a real way, if that makes sense, rather than having friends and family saying what you want to hear. You can have someone who challenges you a little bit. So that's why I signed up, and I kind of wanted to share the good things and the bad things and then my overall kind of impressions at the end. So the good things, so I have a list in front of me, which is why I keep looking down. It's literally here, all my notes. So the good things are there's an app and it's super duper easy to use. I think having an app just makes it a lot easier. There's a few things kind of in with this point. So there's an app which is easy to use. The whole thing is easy to use, easy to sign up. It's really quick as well to sign up. I remember I signed up on like the Monday. I think by the Monday night I'd been given my therapist. Tuesday I booked in my appointment and I had my first session with her on Wednesday. So within 3 days I had my first session, which is really good because a lot of the time, I mean, I've not had therapy before, but friends and people have told me that when you find somebody, they might be booked up for a couple of months, or it might take, a couple of weeks to actually get your first consultation. So having like 3 days is really great if you're after like really quick responses and a quick kind of turnaround in terms of finding someone to talk to. So I thought that was really, really great. Like I said, it is really easy to use. It's really intuitive. It walks you through all the steps and helps you kind of with the prompts and things like that. And then it gives you, I'm pretty sure it gives you a tour of the app, but either way it's really easy to use and I think it's a great system. I think it's also good that it's a subscription, so you know that you're paying a certain amount, like a set price per month, and you get a certain amount of sessions, every 4 weeks is basically charged, which I think is really good as well because it kind of motivates you to book in a session because you're like, well, I've paid for it, I now should book in my session for next week. Whereas if you're doing private sessions, I could imagine sometimes you're like, oh, I could leave it 2 or 3 weeks and not book in. So I think it's quite good that you do have that subscription so that you can, be kind of consistent with it because you're paying for it, so you may as well go for the sessions. Something I'll point out there, because I think I'll forget when I talk about the bad points, is that you can't schedule to have like 2 or 3 sessions per week. It's only, as far as I know, I might be completely wrong, but as far as I know, you can only do 1 session per week, which I think they probably could have 2 or 3 bands, like pricing bands, if you want to have 1 session per week, 2 per week, 3 per week, because I think because it's so quick and easy to use, and because you get assigned somebody really quickly, I think it could be really great for people who want to talk about something a lot, if that makes sense, rather than kind of once per week long term, more like 2 or 3 times per week, maybe for 2 months. So I think that's something they could improve. It's easy to change the therapist. So I had not a bad experience, but not an amazing experience with my first therapist, and I was thinking about switching to another therapist. And it's really easy to do. You just click change my therapist, and then you can change the things that you'd selected at the beginning if you want to, and then it changes it for you. So it's really quick and easy to change therapists if you have 1 session or 4 sessions with somebody and decide actually it's not for me. You can quickly change and be assigned somebody else. The other great thing is that they have 27,000 therapists, which is crazy. That's a lot of therapists, which I think is good as well, because you can just keep changing until you find somebody that does suit you and what you want. I will also say though that it probably is good to at least give someone a chance, saying that I didn't, but I imagine it takes more than a couple of sessions to get to know somebody and decide if they're right for you or not. The next thing I've written down is that you can have phone calls, messages, or video calls. So I chose to have video calls once per week. But you could have a phone call if that's better for you, if you don't want to be on video, or you can do just the messaging. So you have messaging through the app. You don't ever exchange numbers or emails or information, anything like that. You message through the app, which is really good as well, because if you're having a tough moment, or if something's come up, or if you want to change your appointment or change time, or if anything comes up, you can message them directly on the app, and it's super quick and easy, rather than trying to kind of find emails and all that kind of thing. So again, really, really brilliant kind of software that goes along with it. The other good thing is that it's tailored. So like I said, there's 27,000 therapists, and you get to choose what you want them to be specialised in, which I think could be really good for a lot of people. I've written in my bad points, but I'm going to kind of put it on here as well, is that not every single topic is highlighted, which I know you can't have like every single thing that somebody might want to talk about, but like infertility was not one of them. I don't think sexual assault was one of them either. So there's a couple of things that seem quite prevalent and that I think probably a lot of people go to therapy for that weren't on the list. So because there wasn't infertility as like one of the issues you want to talk about, I kind of selected 3 or 4 other ones that were kind of generally in that area but weren't at all infertility, if that makes sense. So it can be tailored depending on kind of the things that you select, which I think is good overall as like a general idea. I think it's a good idea. I think the price is very fair. So like I said, £40 per week I think is pretty fair. I've looked privately online and sessions are about £50, £60, £70. So it is cheaper than what I would pay if I went privately with just an individual therapist. So I think the pricing is really good. So especially if you're kind of on a bit of a budget and you can't afford to pay those £70 therapists for one session, you could go with BetterHelp and pay £40. So I think the pricing is good. It's really easy to schedule calls. So after you have your session, it will suggest to book in your next session and you get a list of kind of dates and times available. So I think that again, it just makes it really easy to book in a call. It's really easy to fit in with your therapist's schedule rather than being like, can you do Wednesday at this time? No, but I can do Wednesday at this time. Oh, let's do Thursday. Okay, Thursday at this time, like back and forth. You can just have a look at their schedule and book it in there and then. So it's again super duper easy. It has a journal on the app, which I think is really good as well. So after each therapy session, I didn't do it, but I would recommend journaling how you're feeling after the session, like talking about what you talked about, any feelings that came up, anything you want to talk about next week. how you think the relationship is going with the therapist, all these different things you could journal about in the actual app, so it's all in one place rather than having a separate journaling app. Or maybe if you have a separate journaling app for everyday journaling and then your therapy journaling goes in with a therapy app. So again, I think the design of BetterHelp is really brilliant. Quick and easy to start, I've mentioned that. And the new thing is there's no research required. So obviously if you want to go more privately and find your own therapist, you do kind of have to spend a lot of time researching, looking at different profiles, looking on different websites, figuring out who you want to talk to, maybe having different consultations with different people to find someone who like works for you, and then you can proceed with them with that whole relationship, I guess. So at least with BetterHelp, you don't have any of that research. You literally fill in the form that takes 5 minutes, and then you're assigned somebody who should be good for you, which I think is really good because it just makes it super duper easy. So that's all the good points about BetterHelp, and you would think that after hearing all that I absolutely love it. And I think as a concept, I think it's good. I think probably for a lot of people, I think it's good and it'll probably work. But for me personally, I didn't have a bad experience, but I didn't carry on, basically. So I'm going to talk about the bad things, and then I'm going to talk about kind of my overall thoughts afterwards. So like I said before, the options where you select kind of what you want to talk about, they didn't include infertility. And because infertility happens to so many people, like so many people have miscarriages, have stillbirths, have infertility problems where they can't get pregnant, go through IVF, like it's such a huge topic in our society. I know it's something that people don't talk about, but you would think that something like BetterHelp would include infertility issues as one of the highlighted things, because I would have just selected that, maybe grief because of the losses that I've had, but I would have found somebody who specialised in that, which I think would have been really, really valuable for me. That wasn't the case, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I think they could update the list and probably include a couple of different things that I personally think are missing, and from my point it would have been the infertility section. So I don't want to talk too much about the therapist because I don't think it's fair, and I'm obviously not going to mention their name. But I had 4 sessions with her, and after the first session I was a bit like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't know how I feel about this. Gave it another chance. The second and third sessions were a lot better, but the 4th session I was just like, no, it's not for me. Like, she's saying things that I don't agree with, that are upsetting me, that I don't see the point in. And it was interesting because then I shared her profile with my friend who's done a lot of therapy for years, and she had about 9 therapists, she said. And she said it's really interesting because on this particular therapist profile, the last education she had was from 1997, which was 25 years ago. Which is crazy, because if you're talking to somebody in 2022 versus in 1997, things change. And I think it's important that therapists are up to date with trainings, with new techniques, with new issues that might arise, or I don't know, like I didn't even notice that myself because I've never really looked into therapists before, I've never really done this before. And it was only my friend who, once I'd kind of decided I don't think this is for me, I showed my friend and she said, well, what has she done since 25 years ago, education wise, which I thought was really interesting. The other thing was that she's American, which is fine, but the time slots were a bit weird, so it was kind of like 6 p.m. until like 4 a.m. so I often booked in like an 8 p.m. slot, which is fine, but that's typically when we're having dinner, so it's a little bit late in the day for me. I think sort of a 4 p.m. or something like that would work a lot better. So I think I now want to find somebody who's in England possibly. But also in terms of that, it meant that she's not... So my friend was telling me, like I said, the one who's done a lot of therapy, she said that in England there's like governing bodies and there's people that make sure that therapists are up to date with qualifications and trainings, and they're on the file and they're registered and they're licensed and all these different things. There's a lot of kind of regulation around therapists, and she showed me 2 different websites. I'll leave them linked down below, which are really great in terms of finding therapists, researching them, seeing what they can do, seeing their education, all that kind of thing. And with having a therapist from America, I couldn't really do that because I think each state is different, and probably the laws in general are different. So having, you know, it's like in England, I think if you have If you'd got a degree in 1997, you would have to have done training since then in the last 25 years to stay current and stay up to date and to stay knowledgeable in your field and do more trainings and learn from more people. Whereas if the laws are different in the States, I guess you probably don't need to do that. So yeah, that was just a little bit strange that she was in the States. And it also meant I couldn't really check her information. So like I said, if I'd gotten somebody in England, you can check their name on these databases to make sure they are a licensed therapist, that they have education and training and all the rest of it. But because she was from the States, I couldn't do that. And then the last couple of things was a lot more personal towards her and towards me. I'm going to mention them briefly. But I think it was an important part of why I decided not to go ahead and continue with BetterHelp. So she didn't understand or remember. So I was talking to her about my infant losses, about doing IVF soon, about really personal topics that are really kind of upsetting and personal to me. And I feel like every time I spoke to her, she wouldn't really remember what I said the week before. And even my last session, she was like, so how do you feel about starting your, what did she say? Starting treatment next week. And I was like, I'm not starting treatment next week. Like, I'm starting probably in 2 months' time. So it was just a little bit frustrating and also confusing that she didn't seem to remember what I told her. And it was just, I don't know. I didn't really enjoy that. I didn't feel like she was actually listening to what I was saying because she wouldn't remember the next week what I told her the week before, if that makes sense. She shared her opinion and hurt my feelings. Now this one, again, I don't know if I'm going to talk about specifics. Maybe I will, so it makes sense. I don't know. So we were talking about the fact that we're going to test our our embryos for Ellis-Van Creveld, which is the syndrome that we have, and also chromosome abnormalities. And she sort of said to me, oh, well, when I was pregnant, they wanted to test my baby, but I said no, because I will love that baby no matter how they come out and no matter what they look like and and aren't I a saint? And it made me feel a bit like, well, then I must be a bad person because I'm testing for these things and other people wouldn't test for these things and that makes them better, if that makes sense. So I felt myself feeling a little bit bad after some of my sessions. That was one example. Another one was a talk about adoption, because I don't know if that's something that at the moment I would go ahead and do. Maybe I would in the future. And she was like, oh, I would let anybody into my home and I would, welcome anybody because I'm such a loving, wonderful person. And again, I was a bit like, well, that makes me feel shit again, because not that I wouldn't at all, but just right now it's not what I see myself doing. So maybe in the future. But it was just weird how I would say something and then she would come back and say, oh, well, I'm better because I would do this, that and the other. So I found that weird. And then the other thing, yeah, she didn't really pick up on things that I was telling her. So like I said, I've spoken about this before, but after the abortion, I was super depressed for about 8 months, suicidal, really bad. This last 12 months, if you've seen my YouTube channel, has been an absolute shit show. There's loads of things to talk about there, and I felt like she didn't really know what to talk about. She sort of was a bit like, so how are you looking after yourself? And then the next week, so how are you looking after yourself? And I was like, the same as last week, I'm fine, but let's talk about, I don't know, I just felt like I would say something and she just wouldn't really notice what I was saying, or not. Sorry, just someone walked past the window then, that kind of threw me off a bit. I feel like I would say something that was probably quite important or deep or upsetting or something like that, and she would just swiftly move on and wouldn't really ask me about it, when I think I was wanting her to ask me about it. So that went a little bit personal with all that information, but it just didn't feel right. And now my overall thoughts, I think it was good to do BetterHelp for 4 weeks, because first of all, I realised that I do want therapy and I probably need therapy to talk about everything I've been through. The second thing is that I realised I want somebody who is specifically trained in infertility, pregnant loss, miscarriage, abortion, that kind of thing. I think that's really important to me. I think when I started, I was like, I just want something quick and easy. I'm just going to talk about how I'm feeling. It'll be fine. I don't really mind who it is. And then having spoken to her, I'm now like, no, I need someone who gets it, who actually really gets it, not someone who's going to make me feel bad about my choices or make me feel like, she didn't make me feel like I was doing the wrong thing, but just make me feel like I was a bad person, basically. And I want somebody who's actually informed on miscarriages and abortions and why they happen and how that feels, and all that kind of side. So it made me realise I need somebody who's specific to infertility. And the other thing I realised is that cheap and easy doesn't always mean good. And now I think there's definitely a market for people who maybe just want to talk about life in general, about struggles and things that crop up in life. And I think BetterHelp could be a really good option, especially if you can't afford the more expensive therapies. You want to pay about £40 per week. I think it's a good option because, like I said, it's affordable, quick and easy, and you can get going within 3 days. I just think for me it wasn't really what I wanted or needed. So yeah, cheap and easy does not always mean good. So what I've decided to do is to research on the 2 websites that I mentioned before. I will leave them linked down below. These are English or British, I guess, websites with therapists from around the UK that are licensed and trained and all the rest of it. So I'm going to look on there and try and find somebody who is specialised in infertility, miscarriage, abortion, that kind of thing. We spoke to King's Fertility a couple of days ago, and they mentioned that they have therapists who might also be good because they kind of know about that side of things as well. So we'll see whether I go with the King's thing or whether I go with this, but either way, that was my experience with BetterHelp. I hope this was useful for you. I think there are definitely pros to BetterHelp. I just don't think I had the best experience, and I kind of realised that if I'm not going to get somebody specialised in miscarriages, abortions, infertility, it might not be super helpful because they won't really know what I'm talking about and won't really be able to help in terms of how to navigate that and the feelings around it. So I think it was helpful for me to try it and then also to gain that kind of insight afterwards. So if you have any questions about BetterHelp, about my experience, things like that, let me know in the comment section down below and I can try and give you any information that I have. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe so you can follow along with my whole journey. I have mentioned I'm doing IVF. I'm going to be doing lots of different videos talking about that as well, so you can go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos, and I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye!